Welcome to the Manders Mindset podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Welcome back to Manders Mindset. We're back. I'm so excited. Welcome back to Manders Mindset. Thank you so much for joining me. I took a little break in February so I could go inward and shift my own mindset. I am so excited to be back for more incredible conversations, more amazing guests that will help you look at the world a little differently. And honestly, that has been my biggest reason and intention of Manders Mindset since the get-go, is to help you get a little gem from something that either I say or one of the guests says to look at the world a little differently. If you've missed Manders Mindset, trust me, I've missed you guys too. But this pause gave me time to reset, refocus, and come back with even more of a powerful mindset to help you guys shift and transform your own mindset in your own life. And today's guests are a perfect way to kick that off. So today I am joined with Hollis and Scott Sunderland, and they help people remember who they truly are at the core and understand what they're capable of. This is a two-part conversation that I am releasing. Scott and I sat down and recorded a pretty long, almost 2-hour episode. I split it up, and in part one of this two-part conversation, we dive pretty deep into their personal journeys and the profound mindset shifts that changed both of their lives. Now, this episode is filled with raw honesty and powerful realizations and so many moments that will make you pause, take a step back, and reflect. So if you're feeling stuck, searching for clarity, or maybe you just need a reminder of the power you hold within inside of you, then this episode is for you. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back to Manders Mindset, where we explore the power of shifting your mindset to shift your life. I'm your host, Amanda Russo, and I am so excited today. I am joined by Hollis and Scott Sunderland. They are the founders of The Art of Looking In. They're educators, coaches, and mentors in the field of self-help, healing, transformation, and personal growth. Through their own trials, tribulations, and transformations, they have found their deep desire and passion to ultimately help individuals remember who they really are and what they are truly capable of. You also may have heard me speak with on Breathwork Magic, and we are going to delve deeper down both of their journeys today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. So that's an awesome bio, but who would you guys say you are at the core? That's typically what I always start asking with. Scott, if you want to go first and tell me who you'd say you are at the core.
Wow. Well, I've been working on that for 59 years, so I should have an answer. I think I'm still, I think that's kind of all our journey is to find out what we really are, right? And that's really what we love to speak about is we say it all the time, who you really are. And there's been so many leaders, thought leaders that, it's about separating the ego from the soul or the spirit. And I think we are in that process in our culture, humanity now, trying to really understand what that means and who we really are. So for me, it's really understanding that I've probably done this 1 or 5 million times living in a human body and understanding that I'm not all these thoughts that run through my head on a daily basis. And I'm getting it. It's a work in progress though, but I'm definitely getting it.
share a little bit about your, what brought you to today, who you are.
What brought me here?
Like, a little bit about your upbringing.
So I mean, if I never thought my childhood was hard, bad, whatever. My mom, she was, a single parent and lived with her, and she had a drinking problem and some other problems. She was definitely suffering. And so it was a very solitary, I guess you could say, upbringing. But in that, I found a lot of strength because I was in charge of my life at 3 years old, which is, great when you want to eat what you want to eat, which consisted of frozen hot dogs. I love frozen hot dogs. So that was kind of the first, it kind of gave me this view of myself because I did everything for myself and played on my own, didn't really have many friends, anything like that. But it gave me this power, this strength. And that really launched me into my life of being an entrepreneur and starting a construction business when I was 19. Went through a lot of learning in that, a lot of success in that, a lot of failure in that. And then I guess the big one for me was, I think I was about 32, 35, something like that. And I contracted an autoimmune disease and I became completely paralyzed, 100% paralyzed. My mind was the same mind that I was before. It was just in a body that just would not respond at all. And, face the fear, face of, would I be able to walk again? All that really was probably one of the greatest lessons that I ever went through, experienced, because it really kind of forced me to look in. And I remember one night I was laying there and I kind of woke up. It was probably middle of the night. And I swore there was this voice that said, what if everything that you see out there is actually just inside your mind and your eyes are not looking out of your head, they're looking back inside your mind. And it totally flipped everything for me. And what that did for me, it gave me this power of, what if I am creating everything out there, but I think it's out there when it's really in here. And I was a big fan of Deepak Chopra and Dr. Wayne Dyer, and they would Deepak would definitely talk about that. And that kind of became the training ground of, well, if maybe I can fix my body, maybe I can, repicture myself. So I would literally just stare at a picture on the wall of who I once was and say, okay, so can you recreate that? Can you get your legs to move again? Can you learn to talk again? Can you feed yourself again? Can you do all the things that you used to do and took for granted? Well, now you kind of wish you had it. So can you get there again? And obviously it worked, whatever I did. So I guess that maybe answers that question, I guess.
Who would you say you are at the core?
That is such a deep question.
Very deep.
Yeah. Who I am at my core. Well, I think like he said, there's the personality M, and then there's, whatever we all are beyond that. I think if we're talking the identity of Emily, like him, my parents divorced when I was young. And so my dad and I moved across the state, and all my siblings lived with my mom. And so I was alone there, same as him. So I think you can relate, Amanda, as being an only child. Sometimes when you're growing up like that, it does require you to find a certain strength in yourself because you're by yourself. And so you don't have, when I would go see my mom, I would be with my siblings and I loved it. I hated being alone. And that's what drove, I think, as we now know and teach people, that's what drove a lot of my life, was that fear of being alone, because I was when I was little and it was terrifying and I hated it, but it also gave me strength until my dad and my stepmom, and I had a brother, and that was amazing because then I wasn't alone anymore. But that core wound of being alone sort of drove a lot of my life moving forward. And, at 15 and 16, I think that feeling alone manifested into not really feeling like a part of culture. I had lots of friends in junior high and high school. As we all know, junior high and high school are the worst years anyway. They suck. They're hard. You're going through all sorts of emotional stuff. So on top of that, I had all this sort of what some would call trauma from my childhood. And that manifested as, I had lots of friends. People would say I was popular, and yet I still didn't feel like I fit in with it. I still felt like I was on the outside looking in, even though I was in. And that ended up putting me the first time I attempted suicide twice, once at 15, once at 16. And at 16, the second time, my mom sent me after that to a girls' treatment center in Ensenada, Mexico. They actually have a Netflix series on the Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs. I think it's called. The Netflix special focused on one of the sister programs in the States, but they mentioned the one in Ensenada, Mexico that I was at. And I was there for 10 months. And actually looking back now, it was a crazy experience. But a lot of the things they were teaching us down there at the core were things that we now teach as far as personal empowerment, not being a victim, all of these deep concepts I learned down there. And when I came back from that, it did fundamentally shift my life. And I ended up going back and meeting my first husband, had my first son, and then we were just babies. We were 19 when we got married. And so obviously it didn't last for too long. And then I met my second husband. We were married for 10 years. And that was another stage in my life that I was like, okay, I'm going to fit in with everyone. I'm going to do what everyone says I'm supposed to do to be happy, which is have a family, have kids, do all that. And then you'll feel satisfied. You'll feel happy. But I wasn't. I felt almost depressed, and I just couldn't. I knew there was more to life, but I didn't know how, or that I could do it, or how to get there. And eventually, they say the saying, when the student's ready, the teacher appears, and ended up finding a book by a man named Dr. Joe Dispenza. And that was really the tipping point to my, you can call, awakening. And that opened the door to Scott and I's life 8 years later. I think to answer your question at my core, I think I've always been a seeker. I've always been a seeker, somebody that's looking for more, deeper meaning, deeper fulfillment. I'm not a superficial, surface level person. I want to go deep on things. So if I could say anything, that's probably who I would say I am at my core.
Our question.
So how old were you when your parents got divorced?
I was 2.
Okay.
And that was in 1984. Not a lot of parents were divorced, then. And
yeah,
it was 2, right?
Yeah,
2?
mine was
I think you were
pretty.
2. Kind of
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And
it was in 1980.
So, yeah.
It was in 1984.
And now, Scott, were you an only child as well? You mentioned your mom.
I have a brother and a sister. They were older, so they were in school and stuff like that. But again, I don't know. I never really looked at it as it was this, bad childhood or anything like that. I really didn't until I was much, much older in my teens, when I would tell the story of how I grew up, and people would be like, "Oh my God, you were like neglected." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." But I didn't really feel that way. I felt kind of like I had the best childhood in a way. I miss my mom. I definitely missed her, and she was in a lot of pain. So I understood, where she was. And she completely flipped her life around and became just an absolutely amazing person, very spiritual. She was, I guess you would call her like, what would you call her? Like, it's not really a psychologist, but yeah, I guess a psychologist, a very spiritual psychologist. But
that's what you
I'm a huge, inspiration, I think, for a lot of people. And, but
You said you fended for yourself a lot. So
I was probably around 3, and my brother and sister would go to school. And, sometimes I'd, whether I put myself outside or my mom put me outside, I would find myself sitting outside waiting for my brother to get home to get me back in the house. But I was I had food. You know what I mean? I learned very early on to kind of feed myself. And again, when you feed yourself, you eat what you want, right? So, but I learned to really, I guess self-soothe would be the right word, but it's still, there's a loneliness there. And, you have what we know now and what we teach and what we help people with is original parent wound, child wound. And when you're 3 years old and things are happening to you, they leave a mark, a very deep trench in your brain. And, it can take a lifetime to overcome. And most don't overcome it at all. They just become a victim. They could create a victim mentality around that wound. So if you're left alone, and it could have been one day, you know what I mean, where you sat in your crib and you cried and nobody came, that can literally leave that wound. And it's kind of like a scar that never heals, a cut that never heals. And, a lot of times I think in our history, it was like, all right, just get over that and move past it. Where I think in today, it goes to the other side of the meter of, oh my God, what happened to you? And you are a victim then. And we're looking for middle of the road. We want to be, yes, this happened to you. It's not your parents' fault because your parents probably happened the same to them. So don't go blaming them. Let's just look at this. Let's face it. Let's find out what the emotion is behind it. And then how do we move forward? Using that as a strength and not a weakness. And it's been very effective individually for our lives, together, working together on that and being able to help a lot of people really attack it in that way, to not be afraid to open up that wound of fear or neglect or, just being alone, because it can have such a cause and effect in your later life.
It's so true. Those 0 to 7, that age range is like, and it can be something so small, even like you mentioned, a one-time thing. It doesn't have to be big.
Yeah, we worked with this one guy, and I'll never forget, we had a community call every week, and he got on it, and he had his hand up, and he wanted to share this thing. He goes, I have to share what happened to me. He said that my girlfriend was in the kitchen, and she was trying to cook potatoes in the oven, and something happened. And she said, can you get these out of the oven? And he said, I don't know where this voice came from. He said, but I just screamed at her, what is wrong with you and why can't you take care of that yourself?
You stupid girl.
You stupid girl. And he was just like,
really
sweet, quiet guy. But he said, I was shocked. And he said, right after I said it, I remembered my father, my brother and I were outside, and my father was teaching my brother how to use a chainsaw.
And they were really young,
like single digit young. I kept asking my father this question over and over again about something I was dealing with. And he's worried, I'm sure, about, my brother cutting his leg off. So we turned around and he called him by his name and he said, just shut up, and
stupid boy.
You stupid boy, just quiet. And you can understand the reaction of the father because, again, trying to save limbs, literally. And he said, it all made sense in that moment. I was just, all these years, I have just been repeating that in my mind, but not calling my girlfriend a stupid girl, calling myself a stupid boy. And that's why it literally can take one sentence, usually out of a parent, sometimes teachers, guardians, right? But mostly parents, that leave that little sentence for you to use to create your reality every day, your perception every single day. And when we uncover it, at first it hurts. But then we can see underneath it and we can say, oh, see, this is the thing that's been in my way all these years. This is why I was never able to start a business, because I kept thinking I was a stupid boy. This is why I didn't do well in school, because I was a stupid boy. This is why I didn't pick the friends that I wanted to hang out with, because I was just a stupid boy. And then that's the moment. That it's a magical moment when you watch somebody
get it.
They don't just get it, they get it. Like the house of cards crashes down and you see through your life, the whole life you've been living, has been based off of one single sentence, and it can transform everything when you uncover that. It really gives you that freedom to then see way more than you ever were.
That's insane, that story. I want to transition a tad, Scott. You mentioned developing an autoimmune disease. I think you said around 30 something. Can you elaborate on that? How did you discover that?
I started my construction company, and I was pretty successful. I was doing really well. I would build retail stores, and I was, more stores, more money. I was really working myself to death. And I was the guy who never said no. So when people asked, I said, sure, I'll do it. And it got to a point where I had so much work and I was so far behind that the phone calls started coming. I started to kind of fail on my job sites. And for somebody who was a people pleaser, it was devastating because I had failed people and they trusted me and I let them down. I remember still working, and all I can remember, because I was away from home, I was on the road working in Maryland, and all I kept thinking is, I just want all this to go away. I just want to go home. I just want to lay in bed, and I want all of this to go away. And literally probably 4 months from that moment, there I was laying in a bed. So in a way, I knew that I created this autoimmune disease that said, okay, no problem. You want to go home? You want to go to bed? You want all this to go away? No problem. Well, but it won't be home. It'll be a hospital. And I knew I created it. And that was the magic for me, because I knew that I did this. So I looked at it as kind of as much as I could. Obviously, when you can't move your body and people don't have answers for you, it's pretty scary.
How quickly did it happen?
So it originally happened probably, for the first onset, was probably 3 days, to where I really I was dizzy. I had trouble moving. And then probably in the next few days from that, I was pretty much in a bed. And then they said, the harder you work, the faster you'll recover. Well, you don't say that to me, because I'm going to work really hard. And I work myself into exhaustion. And how they worked me, I would just sit on that like a little hand bike. And I would sit in a wheelchair, but at a desk. And I would have them strap my hands to this bike, and I would just pedal it with my hands for hours. And it wore my body out. And then it was just complete shutdown at that point. And then, so I knew I created it. And again, I knew that if I create this, I can uncreate this, and I can create better. I can be better than I was. I'll learn, I'll do all the things. But, when this took about a year, and I was in the hospital about 4 months, and you go in the up and down. Some days it's okay. Other days you are in such a depression that nothing is going to get you out of it, because you don't even want to see yourself. I mean, I really did not look in a mirror for probably 4 months, because I was terrified to, and they didn't want me to either. My doctors, they didn't want me to. So I know that now we do create our own perceptions, realities, whatever you want to call them, which means we create our own health, and we can create our own diseases, our own, it's really funny working with people and to see people that have gone through, cancer and all that, and kind of seeing through it, and then explaining to them, maybe this is why this happened for you. And then having a different perspective on it kind of opens up their eyes. And we just had a call with a woman who, she's going through it right now. And we've been working with her for probably 4 years. And I've never seen anybody with going in for bone marrow cancer as glowing as this woman is. and she's such an inspiration when she wasn't at all. She was scared to death a year ago. And now here she is with this, I guess you could call, some people would say, yeah, it could be a terminal illness. And she's like living this incredible life besides it's really crazy. But I knew that's, I went through it for a reason. Didn't know why. I took it as a break. And all I really wanted to do is be able to walk again. Suddenly, I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about, the reputation. I wanted to walk, and that was it. And I would watch people walk in my room, and I'd be like, how are you doing that? How was I able to do that months ago, and now I can't do that? I look at my body, and it says, nope. What is the difference between me and you, and me here, and me 5 months ago? I mean, I just had, and I knew it was something here. And I just said, okay, it happened, and I will walk again. And that became the mission. Focus that. And I would just stare at this picture of me standing on a mountain on a ski trip and just live that day, live that picture. Every single minute of every day, I just sat there and stared at and closed my eyes, and I would just be there in it, feeling the wind, feeling the sun, hearing the people, all of it. And I don't know, it's probably, 10 years later, something like that. I stood on that same mountain with my son, and it was like, oh my God, I made it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you almost like visualized that.
Totally did. Totally. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I never forget that I didn't even realize it, that, it was my son's, I think it was his 16th birthday. So it was almost 15 years because he was a year and a half old when I was in the hospital. And I was taking him, and I said, if we're going skiing, we're going to Alta. And this is where this picture was from. And Alta's in Utah. And when I got on the lift, I realized, oh my God, I'm going there. I'm going to be in the moment where this picture was taken, that changed my life, by the way. This picture completely changed my life. And when I was going on the lift, my son, it was a four chair, and my son was on the other side, on the end, and I'm on the end. And I am getting very emotional. And then the tears come. And this woman next to me says, are you okay? And of course, I tell her the story. By the time we get to the top, the three of us are bawling. And my son's like, Dad, come on. And she's the woman I was talking to. She's yelling at my son, you have any idea what your father's gone through? Get over there. We're taking this picture. And he's just like, whoa, what's happening here? And it's kind of like it was, again, what the human spirit can do, right? What the human spirit can go through, can endure, and what it can overcome. And it's just not my story. It's so many stories, right? And sometimes we just don't choose to look at those stories because maybe we want to be the victim. Maybe it feels better when we are, I guess, less than what we are capable of. I just choose. And there's been plenty of days where I like to be the victim. I mean, I'm no, trust me, I can play that part too. So.
Yeah. No, so post getting out of the hospital, what did life look like for you?
I was angry that it happened, but I was grateful that I was walking. And I didn't understand why I had to go through it. So I guess, you're angry at your creator, whatever your creator is, of why did you do that to me? And, I think that lasted a long time for me, probably a good, maybe 5-10 years of really, why me? And I think even today, there's still a little bit of that in me, but I've been given the glimpses of it happened because you could handle it. And to show you how strong you are, maybe to help somebody else move through what they're currently going through, or maybe to help yourself, 15 years from now when something awful happens, didn't really know. That voice wasn't loud enough for me to hear, So now I'm just incredibly grateful for the simplest things, and still complain. Still complain about, why is there no snow in Taos, New Mexico? And Florida's getting 4 or 5 inches, but we have none. Like, why are you torturing me again? Right? We forget.
Yeah, no, I get it. Now, I want to transition a tad. Now, you mentioned you got married and you had kids and you were checking the boxes basically, but realized you weren't happy with that. How'd you come to that realization?
I probably knew that. I probably knew that very early on. We all know that voice that's like really quiet that says something's off about this, but I didn't listen, as most of us do. And when I met my then husband, I was, going to school. I had my son at that point. He was 4. And it was one of those relationships that it's very fiery in the beginning, which should have been a red flag. That's what the rest of the marriage will be like, but it wasn't, just because I was at a place in my life that I maybe was seeking somebody else to fulfill me, He was like 23, 24. And, we decided, I can look back now and go, I know for sure why I went through some really hard 10 years of my life in that life and in that marriage and as that version of myself. But for sure, I know that had to happen, firstly, to have my daughter, and secondly, to lead me to where I am now and to lead me to that point that I was at right before I read that book. And really, I think what catapulted me is I was going to school when I met my ex-husband. I was going to college and I was working and I had my son. And so it was a lot of stress, as it would be. And a friend said, hey, if you take this pill, it helps you like deal with things better. Like you'll be able to get school done. And it was hydrocodone, actually, an opiate, a pain pill. And I hadn't gotten any surgeries or anything at that point, so I didn't know. But what it did was I got high on the pain pills and I was able to do all of these things. For me, it was sort of like this energy. Also, on top of the energy, it helped me to avoid all my stuff that was under the surface. Had been under the surface for a long time. And so that started my pain pill addiction at that point. And it wasn't like a massive part of my life until I met my ex-husband. And then very quickly into our relationship, my addiction to those overtook my life and nobody knew about it. I was a functioning addict because, at that point I was physically addicted. So I had to keep up. I had my daughter very early on in our marriage and he had a son. So we had 3 kids between us. And that just got worse. Our marriage was really unhealthy and dysfunctional, especially, the first 5 years. And it wasn't a loving environment, so to speak. And finally, at some point, probably about seven years into it, I went, I can't keep this up. I can't. My every waking moment is thinking about how do I make sure I have enough pain pills just to get through my day. And at that point, I was taking like 10 hydrocodone at a time just to function. That wasn't even like to feel whatever anymore. That was just like, and I knew I could not keep that up. And I was ready to go to rehab. Like I was just ready to do whatever. And my husband ended up finding this doctor and they put me on what's called Suboxone, which it's supposed to help you get off of opiates. It's like an opiate blocker, but it's sort of like switching to an electronic cigarette if you're smoking. It's not really getting rid of the addiction. And I knew when I switched that, I'd known the whole time something was off. I knew like, this just is not what I'm supposed to be living. This is not the life I'm supposed to be living. And that feeling got worse and worse and worse. And finally, towards the end, I had this thought for some reason. I don't know where it came from. I wasn't in at that point to the personal development space or mindset space or spiritual space. I didn't know any of that. But for some reason, I knew if I don't do something different, I'm going to get sick, like cancer sick. Like I can't keep this life up. My marriage is a mess. I'm unhappy. I feel like this isn't my life. And my mom ended up moving to where I was living at the time, Kellogg, and her and I were really close. And I think her moving to Kellogg sort of gave me that sense of support that I needed to go, I have to do something different. This isn't working. And when I read that book, it resonated so much. And that's what opened the door to self-help and personal development and, all of that. And, over the course of the next year, I really could see why and how the life and the marriage reflected all of my stuff from my first 7 years. And, really just started doing the inner work, and it changed everything.
Wow. That's now in terms of the pain pills, how long take you to fully stop them?
One day.
Okay.
Yeah. So we went after I picked up that book and I started doing a lot of inner work on myself. So a lot of journaling, a lot of meditation. At the time I was doing a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditation. And so I was and my mom was doing it at the same time. So I had her as a support. I would go to her house and we'd talk about it. Like, okay, what are these feelings we're feeling every day? And, so I had like somebody that I could really do that with. And as over the course of that year that I was doing that, some things happened. One, my intention was not to quit. My intention to do that inner work was not to quit the pain pills. It was to live a happy life, just to feel like I knew that there was supposed to be more to life. Like some people are like, they feel good, like working the 9 to 5 and, the mom that her whole life is her kids. And like, we had a side business. I was working full time and it just wasn't like, it feels like there should be more. Like, I feel like I should feel happy on a day-to-day basis, but I also knew I was numbing myself with the pain pills too. And I knew that marriage was a reflection of that and not healthy, but I was too afraid to leave. I was too afraid of what people would think of me as a people pleaser. And so over the course of that year and doing that work every single day, I ended up going to at the time, what was called an advanced meditation retreat led by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And at that retreat's actually where we met for the first time. I ended up having a very deep spiritual experience. And what had happened in that year was I noticed I didn't need to take as many pain pills throughout the day to feel okay. It was like a side effect of the work I was doing. I was like, whoa. And it was to the point when I went to that retreat, I was barely taking any during the day at all. So I knew, like how he says, I know it was up here. I knew it was up here because I'm like, it's so small that I know in my mind, like I could stop that. And so when I went to the retreat and I had, what changed my life from that moment on after that experience there. And I came home literally that day from that workshop. I left my marriage that night, went and stayed with my mom. I knew that was the first thing that I had to do. And a few days into that, I had stopped completely for a couple days, but then the physical withdrawal started to set in, which I wasn't necessarily prepared for. And then I had to make a decision. I had to decide, okay, I can just like sort of wean myself off of this. That's what a lot of people were recommending. But I'm a very stubborn person. And I knew, like, if I am going to fundamentally shift my life and create a life I want to live, I can't take this with me. There's no way that this can exist in my reality. And I made that decision in the afternoon on a Tuesday. And I went through about 48 hours of one of the most horrid things you can ever imagine is detoxing, physical detoxing from opiates. It was hell. And I just held on to, I know this will pass. I know this will pass. And a lot of people said, physical withdrawal, because I'd been an addict for 10 years. So it had been in my system for 10 years. A lot of people said, oh, it'll be months before you feel normal. Like, be careful because you get suicidal. And I didn't have any of that. After 7 days, I felt completely normal.
Wow. And now this meditation retreat, how long after this pain pill incident then did you go on this retreat? Like, what's the time difference?
So I went to the retreat and then I came home, and it was probably about 4 days after I came home from that I decided to cold turkey myself quit. So it was right after that. And I always say, for anyone listening to this who maybe has struggled with addiction or is trying to get off of addiction, I don't recommend that everybody do that. Like, I recommend that you listen to your own inner guidance when it comes to that. Many people told me, don't cold turkey like that because it can be dangerous. But I knew I had a strong enough will and mindset that I could do it. And I knew, because of the profound experience I had at that retreat, I knew that I could do that. And I did. And like I said, the first 48 hours was hell. But because number one, I didn't listen to what people were saying about, like, they would try to tell me that, and I would just say, no, I'm not going to listen. I did some things to support my body, like supplements, and obviously I slept a lot, but I don't recommend everybody do that. But for me, I knew the right thing to do for me.
Yeah. No, you said listening to their body.
Yeah.
That's what you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned you took some type of pill. I think you said Suboxone.
Yeah. Yeah. So
did that help you?
No. No. So I was on opiates, pain pills for about 8 years, the first 8 years of my marriage. And then that's when I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was going to go to rehab, but we found a doctor that prescribed Suboxone in place of the opiates. And so I was on the Suboxone for about 2 years. So that's what I quit cold turkey. That, it was 2 years later that I went to the workshop and did the work and then stopped that. Like I said, if you go look up Suboxone, it is supposed to help people get off of heroin, even opiates. In my experience, it's not dealing with the problem. It may help sort of wean if that's what you want. I wasn't using it to wean. I was just using it as a replacement. It felt better because, I don't know, it felt more acceptable, but it wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's kind of just like, is there any, like, I don't know what Suboxone is. Like, is there, like, inside of it, like?
So Suboxone is just, they give it to, like I said, it's legal, obviously. Doctors give it to people who, number one, are trying to get off opiate addiction, pain pill addiction. A lot of people who are addicted to heroin, they'll give it to. And what it chemically is, they say, is an opiate blocker. So it makes it so that if you're taking it and you take, let's say, a hydrocodone, you can't get high from the hydrocodone. It blocks it. However, you still get the high from the Suboxone. So, like I said, it's sort of like somebody who's trying to quit smoking cigarettes and then they replace it with an electronic cigarette. Is it better? Maybe, but you're still not getting rid of the addiction.
Yeah.
Okay. So are watching, I mean, I don't want to, again, this is my own journey. Other people may be watching this and maybe they are. I know people who are taking Suboxone and it is helping them sort of create that space away from it. But ultimately, you're going to have to stop that too. And that's going to be hell. There's no way around it. There's absolutely no way around it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So now, you both go to this advanced meditation retreat. Scott, you went to that one, right? As well? That's where you guys met? Okay.
I was a volunteer there.
Oh, okay. So, like, you must have knew about that if you volunteered. Was that like your second time going? Or?
It might have been maybe my fourth, maybe my fifth.
Okay.
Because when I if anybody have seen it, what the bleep do we know? It was, I don't even know, what do you call it? What do you call that movie? Movie, documentary / whatever.
Yeah.
But it was 2006, maybe
It was sort of like, wasn't it around the same era of The Secret?
Yeah.
Like the
same type of thing.
And this stuff started coming.
Way deeper.
You know?
Yeah, way deeper. And I remember seeing that and, knowing this stuff because I experienced it firsthand. And, this guy, it had a whole bunch of people in there, thought leaders, and this guy, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he went through kind of similar to what I went through. He was hit by a car and he said, I'm going to fix my back and to walk again. And he did. And I'm like, this guy's like me. So I started listening to him every day. I would, drive to my jobs for work. I would, go check on my jobs and stuff. And I would just play whatever he had out all the time on cassettes. I will age myself, and CDs. And I just knew, and then finally he came to Philly for a day. He was coming to Philly and I went to see him with a friend. And then he was coming for a 3-day workshop in Philly after the 1 day. And I had said to my wife at the time, I was like, oh, this Joe Dispenza's coming. Do you want to go? And she goes, let me get back to you on that. 2 weeks go by. Do you want to go or not? Because I'm signing up. Because my friend already signed up. And she's like, don't worry. Just go ahead. I'm not going to go. And I went to sign up and it was sold out. And I'm like, I was really angry, because I'm like, I've been listening to this guy for 2 years now and he's coming to Philly and I want to go to this workshop. I just went to this 1 day. And now, so long story short, somehow I get in, and very long story, but fabulous story. But I get in. And I go and the whole 3 days just bawled my eyes out, And I don't know, touched something inside me, opened my heart, I guess you could say. And I'm like, man, I got to do this again. So I went again and I went to one in Mexico, and that blew the doors off of everything of who Scott Sunderland was, all of it. And I was free. I was absolutely free. I was free. I had a lot of survivor's guilt. I was involved in 2012 in a tragedy that it left a big scar. The same things, I guess you could say, that, being paralyzed, kind of, the cause and effect of that led to this. And it was live or die time. And I kind of knew that. I just was really... But it's all hidden underneath the clothes. You know what I mean? But I'm the owner of this, construction company that's successful. People need me, whatever. But underneath all that, you're very hollow and very empty. And it, by going to that, it shifted me dramatically. And when I came home from that, I suddenly... the person that I knew I wasn't anymore. So the person my wife knew at the time definitely wasn't who I was. So she didn't like it. And I said, I want to go to this one and I'm just going to sign up for to be a volunteer. And if I get accepted, I go. If I don't get accepted, I won't. And I got accepted. So I went, and after that, I knew I was not the same person. And when I went home, I knew it was time. I had to go. And, I think we're all faced with these moments that can either change your life or keep your life, right? And that can be whether it's an addiction, because if you're an addict, you're trying to escape something. And maybe it's those feelings we talked about earlier, those original child wounds. Maybe that is what you're trying to cover up. But I promise you, in doing what we do, and because we've went through it, some people are a little slow learners. They have to go through it a few times. But when you've kind of mastered that and, can be a sword for somebody else to, when they're ready to say, okay, this isn't working and it's not anything in my life I need to change. It's me that needs to change. I really do believe that's the awakening of greatness. It really, truly is. And, it may not look very sexy, and it may be really scary because you're afraid of what people are going to think or say or do. But when you take full ownership of who you have been, and then also the full ownership of, I want to be this. And I think that's a perfect explanation for Em of what she went through, because knowing her, she says she's stubborn. It's not really as stubborn as, I don't even know what, it's just a drive that, no, this is my life and this is the direction I'm going. And this is what my action is now as a cause of that. That's what matters. This is where I need, something is telling me I need to go in this direction. I'm going to listen to it and I'm going to follow it. And whatever happens over here happens. She's brilliant at that. And I've, look at that as, a huge strength for me to look to, right? Because it's pretty amazing. But I think when we've seen it more and more, in the last years of, you hear people waking up or, oh, I'm awake, awakened now or whatever, it's not easy. I mean, it's not like I'm just going to cross over the state line and suddenly I'm awakened,
Your rainbows and butterflies and unicorns and everything's beautiful and lovely all the time.
No, it's not like that. I mean, you have moments, you have these amazing moments. And I think they are really the kind of the guidepost of the lighthouse to keep coming this way. We listen to Abraham Hicks, which we listen to everybody, but Abraham Hicks has been, pretty instrumental in our journey, as well as, Dr. Joe and, Fred Allen Wolf and Deepak Chopra and all these great leaders and Tony Robbins, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I was listening to Tony Robbins when I was 20. So I think, hard things make really strong people. And, it takes a lot of guts to get on that field and play that game, knowing that you may not be the best, but at least I'm playing it. And I'm not up in the bleachers yelling at the people on the field saying, you did that wrong. At least I got on the field. And when I see people do that, man, my heart goes out to, but I'm the one who's cheering behind them saying, you can do this. You got to stick and you got to fight. And the result is absolutely amazing, because what shows up for you when you step into that ring and you trust that voice that, many people pray to, whatever you call it, God, whatever it is, when you listen to it and you let it guide you, that's when magic can happen. And it's not this voice in our head, like Potato Joe screaming, you stupid girl, right?
Yeah. When you realize that, I'm in control of my life. Yeah. I'm in charge of my life. Yes. And that was that moment for me deciding I am not taking one more pill ever again. And that's why I say I don't recommend that to everybody, because not everybody's in that place and ready, and they need to support whatever that voice is for them.
Yeah. You have to be ready.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the thing that made you ready, honestly, was when you're in this, workshop for 4 days or whatever, it's a whole new energy you've never felt before.
Yeah.
So I've been on the field temporarily. I need to get back on that field. And if that means I have to leave these pills out here, then I'm getting on the field and the pills can stay out there. Right.
For sure.
So it's like, I know I hit the ball.
Yeah.
I got a double.
Something major happened to me at that workshop. So that sort of catapulted me.
Yeah. Once you know you can hit the ball, then you can swing for the fence, Yeah. So, and I think that is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
For you.
So at this retreat, how did you guys meet? I'm sure there was a bunch of people there just because he was volunteering.
900 people.
Yeah.
I think at that one. And that,
Oh, well, I'll tell the story.
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
I'll tell the story.
Now is very mainstream. A lot of people know about it. For his workshops, he now does 7-day workshops. At this time when we met and when we were going, they were 4 a day.
Yeah.
And they were never sold out. There was But now they sell out within minutes when there's 2,000 to 3,000 people there.
So that was 900 is still a lot though for you so fast. Meaty.
The newest maybe 100. You know what I mean? 100, 150. Something like that.
You can tell how we meet.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm a volunteer, and I would just like to go on record of I was probably the worst volunteer, the best and the worst volunteer, because you cannot tell me what to do. I am not a good follower.
Two stubborn people.
I am very this is how I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? And it was funny because, Adam, who is like Joe's right-hand guy, and he would say, all right, so Scott, this is what I want you to do. And he would go through the whole explanation of, well, they had mind mapping where they would put these electrodes in people's heads, and then they would have them do meditations, and they would measure what the brain was doing in that. And fascinating. I mean,
he's done a lot of
scientific studies in this retreat. So Adam's telling me, he's like, well, first you got to get the person, and they're sitting in front of me, and then you got to get this Vaseline glue, and you put that in their hair, and you put this net over there, and you put the little electrodes on the Vaseline stuff. And I'm just watching them. I'm like, none of this is going to happen. And he's like, excuse me? I said, I'm not going to do any of this. So can I watch the door? I'll be really good at watching the door. So I became really good at watching the door of this thing. So we had to give out they had this thing called heart math. And it was another, experiment, scientific testing. And they would.
Instant electrodes sounds so whatever.
I know, right?
He has tons and tons of scientific research from years of measuring what's happening in people's brains.
And amazing stuff. I mean, groundbreaking.
No, you're some really big colleges now, actually.
Oh, yeah, huge. And so, I have to give out people have to come to me, whoever is in this mind mapping, because there's 45 chairs in the front where these people had to sit, and they had to come to me, and I would give them their number of their chair. They would reach into this little bag and they would pull out their number. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have fun. So I'm running around. First off, I called it mind mapping or heart map. I called it heart map when it was heart math. So again, I represent very well. And people would come up and I say, okay, so pick your thing. And they would reach their hand. I'm like, no, you have to tell me the number that you're going to pick and then go reach in and pick it, because isn't that what we're doing? We're creating our own reality. So if you want to create your own reality, you might as well start with picking the right number. So people would come in, they say, okay, all right, 24. And they'd come out with 32. I say, you're not that good. Get back in the room, work harder. Maybe next you can get within 3. And I would do that. I did that with all these people. And then finally she comes up because she's in heart math. And she knew who I was because I wrote this post in the Dr. Joe community of how I was paralyzed and how I went through this tragedy. And she responded, I'm coming there, and I'm coming by myself, and I'm terrified. And I said, I'll be there. Just look me up. I promise you, you are not alone when you come here alone. You will never be alone when you come here. It's life-changing. And so she comes up, and I said, well, easy. What's the number? And she's like, what do you mean? I said, you have to pick the number, and let's see how good you are. And she goes, number 1. And she reaches in and she pulls out number 1. That's an absolute, true, factual story that actually happened. I'm like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You've been really good there.
And the thing that happens at these retreats is usually you see the same people. So if there's 900 people, you'll end up seeing in Rattinghurst the same person. And that's sort of what kept happening. He'd be volunteering, and I'm going through crying my eyes out for 4 days and doing a lot of healing. And, we would keep running into each other. And there was a moment after that, I think it was like second to last day. And it was during we would do walking meditations at 6 a.m. in the morning. And this is at
Palm Springs.
Palm Springs, and this beautiful hotel is where this one was held at. And there's this gorgeous golf course. And so we would go out and do the walking meditations at 6 a.m. on the golf course. And that's that morning during that walking meditation was when I had my very powerful experience. And when it was done and I came up and I'm like walking around, I was trying to find the girl that I was rooming with because she was really the only one that I knew there. And because I wanted to tell her what happened, I knew something shifted in me. And so I'm like go to walk over this hill, and I see someone walking towards me. And you hug everyone there. Like even after meditations, like everyone's hugging everyone. It's a beautiful, amazing experience. Because everyone should do it once.
It is a lot.
And I see him walking towards me, and we hug, and it's Scott. And as we're hugging, it was so bizarre because I was like, does he know what just happened to me? There's no way he could know. But there was a familiarity when we hugged that I
didn't know it was her, by the way. I couldn't see her because the sun was right behind her. So she was just like this dark figure. Then I just saw standing there, and I was just like in love with the whole thing that was happening. So,
and there was a familiarity. I can't explain that any better way, but it felt like, oh, we have known each other for many lifetimes, and we're just meeting again in this one.
Long story short, we got married there. Almost in that very
at that
same exact spot.
After a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat.
I love that. Oh my gosh. That's adorable. So now when did you guys start working together? When did this business and like you guys clicked, and did you know right then? Like, you did.
Well, there was a lot that happened within that moment to 2 years later. You know, like he said, he went home from that. He ended up leaving his marriage. I went home from that workshop. That's when I quit the pain pills. I left that night that I got home because I knew, in our work, I talk a lot about leaving from love. And what I mean by that is people will leave relationships or leave family members or friends because they think that person's the problem. And yes, part of that, if you're around dysfunctional people, but the thing you have to understand is it's something in you that needs to really be healed. And so when I left my marriage, it was from a place of deep love for myself and for him. It was like, I knew it was not a loving thing for my kids, for him, for me to continue in this marriage. So when I left, it was from love. I knew that, I needed, like he said, I needed to follow something that was pulling me. And it was probably about a week or two later after that, we ended up connecting on the phone and, started talking on the phone. And then it was a couple weeks later, we went to another Dr. Joe retreat, but it was an follow-up advanced or something. It was like his last level. So it's like really, and it's only 2 days, and it was in Mexico. And it was pretty much then that, I always joke there was no dating. I swear to God to you, there was no dating. Like there was no hiding anything it was like we just had always been and just were. It was as if we knew everything about each other. It felt, the only other person in my life that I had ever felt that safe or that loved or that connected to was my grandma growing up. She really was the only person. And that's how it felt with him. It was like, it just was. And that was it. It was not like, and we lived across the country from each other. So we had to do long distance for, a while. And then eventually I made the decision to move to Pennsylvania. And like I said, in those first 6 months, him and I went through a lot of hard times. Hard because we lost a lot of people in our life. We lost a lot of people that didn't like the changes I was making and he was making, because that's what happens when we change and transform a lot of times, unfortunately. And so we went through a lot, but the one thing I know neither one of us ever doubted was, number one, that we were supposed to be together. It was never a doubt. And number two, that we should follow this path and that we should help others follow this path. So it was pretty early on, probably 6-8 months into us being together, that we said, we have to help other people live a life that they know is possible because we're doing it.
Yeah.
And we both knew that. He ended up writing his book, Finding Ugly, that talks about his experience of being paralyzed and then losing his best friend. He wrote a book about that same time. And from there, it was like, okay, yeah, let's start a coaching company where we can really help people do what we did. And it's hard. Like he said, it's challenging. I don't care what change you're making in your life. I don't care if you're quitting smoking, losing weight. I don't care if you're starting a new business, if you're getting out of a toxic relationship. any change you decide to make in your life is going to be challenging, and there's going to be people in your life that aren't going to like it. And I knew that. I knew that first year of practicing his meditations before I went to the retreat and doing the inner work, I knew deep down inside, I actually think people are not going to like it when I start changing, because I was a chronic people pleaser and I was always about doing everything for everyone else. And when you had that dynamic, people don't like it when you take your power back and say, this isn't me anymore. And so it was very challenging. But we look back now 7-8 years later at our kids. We have 5 kids between the 2 of us. And thank God that all happened, 7 years later, thank God. And our business has changed and transformed and evolved.
Because we
have
transformed and evolved.
Yeah.
But
we knew early on, okay, we need to help people do what we've been able to do.
And so you started with coaching.
Yes. Yep. We started, he was using a lot of mindset techniques, the same stuff that he used to get him out of the hospital.
Yeah, I just taught people what I did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, listen, it's just easy. Yeah. It's really easy to do, but your body's going to reject all of it. It's not going to want to be a part of any of it, because it likes being who you are. Whether, you're a victim, whatever your body tells you, your mind is going to get it first, but then your body is going to really give you the problem. So you have to outlast your body. And that's why we would say it takes about a year to really implement this. You have to be easy with yourself. Awareness is 90% of it. Once you understand what your mind-body connection, what is happening there, then you have a greater understanding. And I think you take it easy on yourself a little bit more, because, January 1st, that gym is full, right? That gym is full of people on January 1st, but, come February 17th, so we're like, listen, your job on January 1st is just to walk in the gym.
Yeah.
Don't lift the weight.
Yeah. Integration is such a big thing that people don't talk about. And, we were watching community. We were watching people go to these Joe Dispenza retreats and then not change their life when they got home. And so we were like, well, we're doing that. Surely we can help people do that. So he was really working with the mindset. And shortly into that process was when I found out about breath work and ended up taking the Soma breathwork class that I took. And so I was really helping people focus on the breath work. He was really helping people focus.
So it's really mind and body.
Yeah.
So that's really how we.
And actually for the first year was just him and I. And then after that, we ended up meeting our very best friend. His name's Simon Harris, at a Joe Dispenza retreat a year later. And he was going through a lot in his personal life. He ended up losing his wife. That's why they were there, because she had cancer. And he taught and practiced this healing modality called freedom activation. And so the 3 of us were like, wow, that really fits in. The freedom activation fits in with the mindset and the breath work. So we ended up working, the 3 of us, for about 2 years.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. Really amazing.
Coaching people and helping people.
Yeah.
I like how you said, go to the gym, but don't lift a weight, training your mind to do the thing, I'm somebody who, and I don't necessarily look like it now, but I went through a crazy weight loss transformation. I lost and maintained a 70-pound weight loss. And I went through a lot of trials and tribulations with that. And Atomic Habits, I don't know if you've read the book, but like the small little habit, like leaving the gym clothes out. And there would be times I'd go for 5 minutes and people are like, why would you go to the gym for 5 minutes? Because I'm checking off the fact that I did it. It's like changing this identity,
Yes.
Yes. Because you think like, all right, so today I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lose 3 pounds on the treadmill, which, come on, that is like saying I'm going to get my PhD today when I even stepped into a college classroom, right? It's just not going to happen. And we tend to do that to ourselves, right? So you really have to start the babyest of steps. And just to go sometimes.
To make them
to just get in the car to go. And we would literally have people, I would say it's not the weight. It's not the paralysis. It's not the cancer. It's not whatever the doctor tells you it is. It's your mind. It is that voice inside your mind that is creating whatever that is, whatever that wound is. That's why you're going through the weight. That's why you're going through whatever the doctor tells you it is. And I think when we are really gentle with ourselves, and I forget who it was, but I remember talking to somebody and I said, just get in the car. Just get in the car. There was a woman we worked with. She could not leave her apartment. She was so ill, she could not leave her apartment. And she came on one of the calls and she said, I crawled out my front door. I crawled down the steps, hands and knees in snow. And not a year later, she said, I was in the woods and I camped by myself. And there was like 2 feet of snow and I made it, because that's literally what it takes sometimes. So sometimes it's not about going to the gym. It's just getting in the car to go to the gym, because it's hard. You're overcoming a habit that isn't like, it's not a donut habit. It's not an ice cream habit. It's a habit of you. It's who you have become your whole life. And now you're going to fight that and think, oh, well, I'll just go to gym. Well, January 1st, I'm going for 4 hours. And then the next day, the second, I'm just going to do 2. I'm going to do legs for 2 hours. I'll probably lose, I'm thinking 2.5 pounds, right? That's about right. And then I'm thinking the third, I'll take the day off. I'll just run around the house like 27 times. And then on the 4th, I'll go back and that's going to be my marathon. I'll do 6 hours. Bro, you ain't getting out of bed. On the 2nd, you're not going to get out of bed, because you're going to say, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But you can get out of bed, and then you can walk across the floor. Then you can go to the bathroom. Then you can get in the car, and then you can say, you know what? I did something today. That's winning.
Yeah.
And if that's where it has to start, then that's where it has to start. But you have to find that strength in you to say, I did good today. I did good today. I could have sat on the couch or never got out of bed, but I got out of bed. I could have sat there and never took a shower. I went in the shower. I got a shower. I did good today. And chances are the next day you'll go further.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Us too. Thank you so much. I hope your listeners got lots of value from that today.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah. We like to talk.
I know. So do I. Where is the best place for the listeners to connect with you guys?
So best place website is theartoflookinginc.com. Super easy. And then YouTube. Really great place. And it's Art of Looking In on YouTube.
Okay, awesome. And I will link both of that in the notes. And
Great.
No pressure, but any final words for the listeners? I do just like to always leave it back to the guest.
I don't know if that's a good idea. No. I think I'd say.
Yeah.
You got any final words?
It exists. It exists for you. So go find it. I mean, it is whatever you're looking for, happiness, whatever it is.
For
I
sure.
promise you,
Yeah.
as someone who's been in both sides, it exists for you. So I always end everything with, go find it. Go find it.
I love that. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Manders Mindset. Thank you guys so much for joining me for another episode of Manders Mindset. I hope this first part of Em and Scott's journey really resonated with you. And stay tuned for the next episode of Manders Mindset, where we delve into the second half of Em and Scott's journey. And I wanted to share a few takeaways that really resonated with me. And I encourage you guys to reflect on these. First of all, your past does not define you, but it can shape you. Scott and Em both shared childhood experiences of loneliness and struggle. Yet, instead of being victims of their circumstances, they used those challenges as fuel to fuel their personal growth. Our wounds early on in childhood can either hold us back or they can serve as a foundation for our strength. You know, I've talked on some episodes about how At some point, it stops being about what was done to you or your circumstances or your upbringing. And at some point, it becomes how you shift your mindset in what you do with the circumstances that have led you to today. The next takeaway is how your mind is way more powerful than you think. Scott's story of overcoming full body paralysis through visualization is a testament to the power of the mind-body connection. He didn't just hope to walk again. He mentally rehearsed it in his mind. He lived it. He visualized it in his imagination, and it made it his reality. They emphasized how healing begins when you take radical responsibility. M's journey of overcoming addiction was not just about quitting pain pills. It was about fundamentally changing her mindset, healing deep inner wounds, and stepping into a version of herself that no longer needed or wanted to escape reality. She emphasized the importance of listening to your inner voice and to make changes from a place of self-love and not a place from shame. They also emphasized the power of a single thought. One sentence spoken to us as a child can shape our entire identity. Scott shared the powerful example of someone who unknowingly carried the label of, quote unquote, a stupid boy for decades. These subconscious beliefs run deep inside of us. But once we uncover them, we can rewrite and change the story, because everything is just a story. Next, Em and Scott emphasized that transformation is never easy, but it's so worth it. They both experienced major life shifts that required them to walk away from certain relationships, certain careers, and old identities. Change isn't comfortable. But as Scott said, it exists for you. So go find it. Go create it. Now, this is just part one of our amazing conversation. In part two, we'll dive deeper into their work with personal transformation, how breathwork and mindset techniques change their lives, and how you can start shifting your own reality. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me on this episode of Manders Mindset. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate it if you left me a rating, left a review, and shared this episode with anyone that you think would benefit from hearing it. Thanks, guys. Until next time. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.